I'm Jeff Fritz with SoundStage.com, and I'm joined today by Aldo Filippelli with Elite Marketing Dynamics. Aldo, how are you today?
Great, Jeff. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good. I appreciate you joining me today. I wanted to talk a little bit about your company, EMD, and then also about the brands that you represent, which I have some familiarity with both. It's Estelon and Krell. But before we get into that, Aldo, tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about what your company does.
Well, I've been in the industry since I was a kid. My father owned a car stereo shop in Chicago. Actually, dating back to 1950, it was a TV and radio repair shop that eventually, by the 1970s, became a car stereo shop. So I grew up in that environment, and I was one of these, nerdy kids. I was building Heath kits for speakers, and I was building Dynaudio kits for amplifiers when I was 9 years old. I've been addicted to hi-fi ever since. Um, as I progressed further in my career through car audio, I became one of the top car audio installers in the country from 1988 to 1992. I was also a contributing editor for Car Audio Electronics magazine, doing the technical notes section, everything from designing car audio systems to explaining how cables work and the math formula in cables and all that fun stuff that people don't ever talk about. And then I started making speakers. I started designing my own speakers. I had a client of mine that was a professional musician that owned a recording studio in Chicago that asked me to make a pair of near field monitors so he could try it out. He heard what I was doing in the cars, and he's like, if I could get that in the studio, I want that. So I started working on designing near field monitors by 1990. By 1991, I had a business called Synergistic Technologies, and I was selling speakers into the recording industry. Um, I had a customer of mine that kept pushing me and pushing me and pushing me to do better in the business and grow the business. And he said, "Listen, I'll put money on the table and I'll become your partner, but we need to save some money on costs." So instead of buying from Matasound, the plan was to go to Europe and buy drivers directly from the manufacturers. When I went to go do that by 1993, it was Dynaudio that was my primary supplier. So I met with Dynaudio. We discussed what I was doing in my business, discussed purchasing drivers from them so that I could put it into my systems. But then I saw that they had literature for all their home speakers. I didn't even know that they had home speaker systems at that time. I thought they were only a driver manufacturer. Again, this is early 90s. So um, I saw that they had pro audio equipment, active monitors, and midfield monitors for studios. I saw that they had aftermarket car audio products. So I asked them, how come you're not distributing any of this in the United States? And they said, well, we haven't found the right business partner. So I raised my hand and I said, well, instead of having my own speaker company, I'd really like to distribute Dynaudio. So
Okay.
it took a little while, but by June of 1995, I launched Dynaudio North America, and I brought in a couple of partners. I brought in then owner of Dynaudio, a gentleman by the name of Wilfried Ehrenholz, who was my partner, and the guys that had worked with me to help establish the company, basically just their blood, sweat, and tears and not getting paid. I gave them a little bit of my equity shares so that, I spread the wealth a little bit so that everybody was an owner. Um, Built the business up over the years. By 2000, we were doing really well. Dynaudio had become a major player in the speaker industry in North America. We had a strong dealer base. We were doing very well financially, very profitable. And at that point in time, I made the decision to sell out my shares of the company to my partner, Wilfried. So he took over all of Dynaudio North America and merged it into Dynaudio Group International. So it became a global entity for the Dynaudio company. And this was critical because at that time they were just about ready to engage with Volkswagen. They already had Volvo as an OEM account. Now they wanted VW and they wanted Bugatti and they wanted Mercedes and a couple of other companies. So Wilfried felt that by adding Dynaudio North America into the group as a whole, that would elevate the value. So without getting too deep into that, I sold, became an employee, and then by 2007, Dynaudio Group had been so embedded into the OE side of the business, which was the major profit center for the company at the time. I'd left. I walked away, and I went to go do real estate in 2007. I had one good year, then the market collapsed. I was doing commercial real estate, and I was CCIM certified, which in the commercial real estate world, only about 10% of the top brokers in the country get CCIM certified. Basically, what that meant is that I had the ability to do underwriting and pull up full financial analysis and explain to all the investors how to best invest their money. I did very well for a couple of years, but I hated it. I absolutely hated the environment. I hated the people. I know that's a strong word, but I really missed selling hi-fi, and I really missed, most importantly, the people in the audio industry. I think that the audio industry is full of really genuinely good people that are enthusiastic and full of energy and really love the hobby. And it's a strong common ground. So I was looking for that. I wanted to get away from the investment side of things. So I got back into selling audio.
And this was around 2009, 2010?
2010. And I had already started Elite Marketing Dynamics. Elite Marketing Dynamics started as my personal real estate business. So because I was working for a real estate company in a 1099, I needed to have my own business. So that's how I started Elite Marketing. But as I went into the audio industry again, I decided instead of being a distributor and doing, distribution the way that I had done it before, bringing in the inventory and putting a lot of money on the table and waiting for 5 to 6 years to pull any of the investment capital out, I decided to start being a consultant. So my first gig was Miller and Krell, and they were just purchased at that time by a couple of Danish guys that used to work for M&K when it was an entity. When M&K went bankrupt, they were able to buy the logo out of bankruptcy court and then start the business up. So I worked for them for a while, for a couple of years, got them back into Best Buy and Magnolia and, dealer network across the country. And we were doing well for a while there. But the company really didn't have the engineering. They couldn't come up with new products. They were working off of reverse engineering the old stuff. So the new stuff that they decided to come out with was subpar, actually, at that time. Subwoofers were outstanding. Their subs were some of the best, but they were trying to do in-wall and in-ceiling and other things that were sort of missing the mark at the time. So I left and I went to become a regional sales rep. So I had a whole bunch of lines that I brought in. Savant was my biggest. And this is me living in the Chicago market at the time and running the rep firm out of the Midwest. Savant was our big client. That was where we were getting the majority of our commissions from.
Now, can you remind our readers slash viewers, Savant makes what types of products?
They make home automation products. That's their primary business. And back at this time, they were using the Apple Mac Mini, if you remember that piece. That was the hub for their processor. And they were an upscale automation company like Crestron, just doing it a little differently, doing it easier. And so this is 2012, 2013. By the end of 2013, Savant decided to terminate all of their reps across the country and go direct. I didn't have a choice. So I didn't have a big line at that time, so I was looking for different lines. I brought in Opalum, which was a Scandinavian company that was making digitally active on-wall speakers that were super cool. We did that for a little while, and then Opalum sold to Cirrus Logic and shut down the entire speaker division. It's because the technology that they were using was the major value of the company. They had written all the algorithms for the coding processes of the DSP. So everything that they did was at an advanced level, higher than Dirac and some of these other companies that were emerging at the time. So Cirrus Logic bought them and shut down the speaker division. It was at that time that I decided that I was going to move out west and I was going to get a normal job. I still kept the rep firm. I had guys that were working for me, including an ex-Dynaudio employee that worked for me. And then by 2016, the rep business without me being in Chicago really wasn't succeeding. So I had to shut it down.
Let's circle back for 1 second. I just want to ask this question. M&K, are they still a going concern, or did they shut down after your affiliation with them? How did that end?
So they had pulled out of the U.S. At the end of 2012, and then by late 2013, they signed on a distributor. And to the best of my knowledge, they're still working with distributors.
Okay.
And their focus is really home theater. They're not trying to be a hi-fi company. They're not trying to be high end. They know their niche, and that's what they're staying in. But so my firm was a traditional rep firm at that time. So I had consulted for M&K, but then I also had the rep firm simultaneously that was doing Savant and Leon and Meco Shade and a bunch of other companies that were mostly CI, custom install products. But then in 2017, I took a job working for the Mac Group in a sales position at Audio Research. So I totally shelved my personal business. I closed down EMD at the time because it was considered competitive in the aspect of my employment. So when I saw that things were not necessarily going so well internally at Audio Research in early 2020, and that there were some rumors within the company that the company may be sold, I left. I quit. I didn't know who was going to buy it. I didn't know what the future was going to hold. So when I left, I decided to restart my consulting business, Elite Marketing Dynamics. In doing so, one of the companies that I had very high on the list was Estelon. I had met them for the first time at the Munich High-End Show in 2018. Fell in love with the products. I thought that the speakers were some of the most attractive, most unique, and highest performance that were available. Because I have a speaker design background myself, I was really able to appreciate some of the things that they did in their designs that would pretty much impress an engineer, but not really impress the common consumer, because they don't know things about the shape of the baffle and some of the things that they do to control the dispersion off of the cabinet, which is all very critical. A lot of people in this industry don't even know the vast importance of controlling those reflections off the cabinet. So I really dove in, and I met with Alyssa, and we talked it through, and we decided that I would be a consultant and sales agent for them throughout all the Americas. So Elite
Now,
Marketing.
define exactly what that means when you say a consultant and sales agent. Do you handle what would typically be distributor duties without housing the inventory, or is it just on the marketing side? Tell us a little bit exactly what that entails.
So on the consulting side of things, I would be giving them advice and recommendations on everything from marketing to public relations to sales channels, managing what would be their distribution, because at that point they're the distributor, right?
Okay.
So they're distributing the product themselves out of Estonia into the US, and I'm acting as their legal US sales agent for those products. So on one half, I'm acting as a consultant to sort of guide them, direct them, give them advice, and sort of steer the direction of their distribution here. And then on the other end, I'm acting as their sales agent, where I'm actually going out and meeting with dealers, onboarding the dealers, training them, getting them sold on the products, assisting them in the sales of the products, managing all the logistics, and also onboarding and training and selling to distributors in Latin America.
Okay.
So that all started in September. That started September 1st of 2020. And while that was starting, when it was just initiating, I was already in discussions for a few months with Krell. I've known Walter Schofield for a number of years. Great guy, super experienced and knowledgeable.
Now tell us what Walter's current position with Krell is, just so everyone's aware.
He is the COO.
Okay.
And one would think, okay, well, you're just an operations manager at that point, but he's sort of the man that does it all at Krell. He's in charge of pretty much running most aspects of the business. Rondi, who is the CEO, entrusts him to help elevate the brand, manage the production, get the product out the door, build the distribution channel globally, and then manage the U.S. sales channel. Well, they had been using independent sales reps throughout the entire country for years. In fact, when I was in Chicago in 2014, I was a Krell rep as well. That's when Bill McKeegan was still there, and he was the president of the company.
Right.
So moving fast forward, I just came on board with Krell in mid-June. So June 15th was my first day with them. And much like what I'm doing with Estelon, I'm also doing with Krell. I'm assisting them in their sales efforts throughout pretty much all of the Americas at this point. We haven't really dove into Canada yet because there is a distributor there. And the plan is that I will assist and work with the distributor to help elevate the brand image and give them a support channel. So I will be the point man for the Canadian distributor. But when it comes down to the U.S. market, the vast majority of the U.S. is my territory now. We only have a couple of territories where there's still reps. And those reps that are there were chosen to stay and remain because they're performing.
So what can we expect from not only your company, but Estelon and Krell for the rest of 2021? Are we going to see you guys at some shows? If we have shows later in the year, what should we expect from those brands and from your firm for the rest of this year?
The plan is, I got to remember the timeline. So since there's no Munich show, I think the first show this year is Rocky Mountain. So Estelon is going to be at Rocky Mountain Audio Fest, sharing a room with 3MA Audio out of Houston, which is one of our dealers, and Nordost Cables and NBL Electronics. So there's going to be a room that has that product in it, that is sponsored by 3MA Audio. So it's really a joint effort, but it's 3MA's room. Then after Rocky Mountain, we're going to Expona, and the plan is at Expona, Krell has their own room, and it's going to be Krell and Estelon, and we're going to partner with our local Chicago area dealer, which is the Audio Experience, who used to be called F1 Audio. So they will manage that room and will be there to support all their efforts. Then later on in the year, I think it's at the end of November, is the Capital Audio Fest. So at Capital Audio Fest is going to be another Krell and Estelon room, but this time we're sharing with VPI. Okay. And the plan is to hopefully have some new product to show. Maybe a little bit from Krell, maybe a little bit from Estelon. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. It's late in the year, and the timing is such that we may have the product available at that time to show. But I can't really divulge what that product is at this point.
That's another video for another day. Well, Aldo, listen, thanks a lot. I do have one more question for you. You do have quite the vast experience in the industry. I know you've got most of the time a pretty awesome setup at your own home. Tell us about a recent listening experience, something that's kind of blown you away, either at your place or that you've heard elsewhere, or maybe even something musically that's really knocked you out.
Well, considering that we're still just emerging out of a year's worth of lockdown, basically, I've been listening at home, and one of the most amazing things that I had heard was the Estelon Forza with the Krell electronics here in my house. And I have a really large room, and it's not ideal for acoustics whatsoever. It's one of these great rooms that some architect decided to make look super cool, but is horrible with acoustics, right? And my wife is like, well, don't you want to have a man cave? Well, we don't have a basement here in Las Vegas. Nobody has basements. So I'm like, I don't have anywhere to put a man cave except in the living room. So I chose to make the living room my hi-fi system. And when I was with Audio Research, it was all ARC equipment with Vandersteen speakers that I had owned. Now it's Estelon and Krell. And when I got the Forzas, and I put the Forzas in my room, now this is a speaker that is a sealed box design with dual 11-inch woofers. And I thought for certain I was going to have all kinds of bass issues like I did with the Dynaudios I tried. I tried with Wilsons. I actually had an older pair of Sasha 2s that one of my friends had loaned to me to try out. I was having all kinds of bass loss in the room acoustically, which is why I bought the Vandersteen speakers, because the Vandersteen has the dual 12-inch woofers with a dedicated 400-watt amp, an 11-band parametric EQ. So I was able to custom tailor the bass in the speaker for the room, right? And it worked. It worked incredibly well. It was as if I had multiple subwoofers in the room that were just dialed in. So I bring in the Forza, which is a passive speaker. And I'm like, okay, I'm just keeping my fingers crossed. I was shocked. Not only did the design perfectly couple with the room, I am talking, it was the most impressive sounding bass response from any loudspeaker that I've ever heard anywhere, because it sounded like live bass. It was fast. It had super quick decay. It was tight. It was accurate. It was extremely powerful and low and authoritative. And I'm looking at this going, how is it that I couldn't get this with the Dynaudios? I couldn't get this with the Wilsons. And then it dawned on me, it's because of Estelon's configuration with the dual woofers at 45-degree angles in the front of the cabinet. They use it to couple with the floor and to couple with the corners of the room. They're actually using the room itself as the low bass reinforcement tool for the loudspeakers. So in that regard, pretty much any and every Estelon loudspeaker will do the same thing. And it doesn't matter if you got a 20-foot high ceiling like I have. It will couple with the room, and it will give you very linear and evenly dispersed bass. So I was blown away by how incredibly easy and fast the speakers clicked in the room and how amazing they sounded. I mean, I heard things in the SoundStage that I had never heard before in my house. Layer upon layer upon layer of depth. And I'm looking at this going, well, I got solid state electronics. There's no tubes over here. And I got a pair of passive loudspeakers that are just absolutely singing. So I put on a track from Proprius Recordings. It's called La Dante. It has, one of the tracks is a religious track that a chorus of singers is singing in Latin, accompanied by a chamber ensemble. And this is recorded in a church, I believe in Denmark or Sweden. As I'm playing this, now I've used this track as a demo track for decades. I used to use it even when I had the car audio business and designing and installing car systems. For the first time that I've ever heard the track, for the first time in my experience of listening to the track, I could hear the reflections off the roof of the church. I could hear the reflections behind me. I'm looking above my head. I'm looking to the sides. I'm looking behind me. I could clearly hear how the entire room has come to life with just a single pair of stereo speakers in front of me. Never had that experience before, and it made the Q sound thing sound like a gimmick because this literally transported me into the church during the recording. It was unbelievable. I mean, other than being super musical, what it was doing with the spatial effects was just mind-blowing.
Well, if that doesn't whet people's appetite to get out, hopefully later this year and hear some Estelon speakers driven by some Krell electronics, I don't know what will. But it definitely makes me want to hear that combination. Maybe in your own room. Maybe we'll all have to travel to Aldo's house.
That's funny. Well, I could accommodate you guys. I'm more than happy to do so. I will share this. And I feel that this is important for me to share. I've been in this business a long time. This is my 37th year in the audio industry. I've worked for a lot of companies, as I've mentioned. I've also had my own business for years. I have never worked with a company as absolutely professional as Estelon. This is a company who understands every single aspect of what to do and how to do it the right way. They care about people. They care about doing the right thing. They care about having the best product that they could possibly produce and sell. And they really genuinely are passionate about the sound. They are their own customers. And I have to tell you, in the audio industry, that's rare because even though a lot of people get into this business as a manufacturer because they had the passion, because they were really engaged in audio and they were an audiophile, they tend to lose that over the years. They tend to be focused mostly on the business side of things, and they lose touch with how they got involved and why. Estelon's been in business for almost 11 years now. Their passion is the highest that I've ever experienced in any audio company in the industry that I've ever worked with, by far. Wow. And I really, truly feel that this is a company that is just going to explode. This is a company that's going places. They have the full intention on coming up with more affordable products. They have the full intention of coming up with active loudspeakers that have built-in streaming technology. They want to do a lot of things, but on a very high performance aspect. So just because we're talking about possibly Wi-Fi speakers, oh no, this is not going to be your run-of-the-mill type of Wi-Fi speakers. This is going to be the Ferrari of Wi-Fi speakers.
Well, Aldo, with that, listen, I really appreciate your time, and I've got some experience with Estelon as well, having reviewed an Estelon product earlier in the year, and they are simply amazing loudspeakers. But I really appreciate your time, and also the history of EMD, and also what's coming from Krell and Estelon. I think the audiophile and all of us can look forward to those products, and hopefully hearing some of them live at some shows later in the year. Certainly Munich next year, I'm sure, but hopefully in the States later in 2021. But Aldo, thanks again for your time. I really do appreciate it, and hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, Jeff. Really appreciate it, and great talking with you today.
All right. Bye-bye.